Welcome to the White and Blue Podcast. I'm Doug Goodnow and my co-host is Colleen McGinnis. We are here to tell the interesting stories of Hillsdale College alumni, or more accurately, help them share their own stories. Here's a little bit about today's guest. Wolfgang Krenzer from the class of 2002 took a bit of a detour to Hillsdale, first serving a stint in the military before enrolling as an undergraduate student. Learn about his military experiences as well as his distinguished career with Marathon Petroleum as a senior financial analyst. And we'll also learn about his German heritage. Wolfgang, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here.
Wolfgang, I have had the pleasure of knowing you for a year or so, and you've jumped right into Hillsdale activities and alumni engagement. And so it is such a joy to have you in the studio this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. I look forward to this.
All right. So you had a little bit of a roundabout route to Hillsdale, spending some time in a nuclear and submarine program with the Navy. And I'm sure I just butchered that. But tell us maybe briefly how you found Hillsdale, what kind of your trajectory to Hillsdale was in that route.
Sure. So I joined the Navy in 1991. At that time, I wasn't yet interested to go to college because I wanted to save money. The slogan was, it's not just a job, it's an adventure. So I wanted to join the Navy and save a lot of money and see the world, maybe get on an icebreaker submarine and get to Antarctica or somewhere else. As it was, I'd eventually get to Hawaii, which was a warm weather state instead of the cold. So the nuclear program for the Navy is a couple of years of school, accelerated, including a prototype, and then you report to your ship or submarine. If you're submarine bound, you go there, and then you finish out with a 4 years enlistment after that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and so while I was in the Navy, I think in the fourth or fifth year, I longed to get a liberal arts degree somewhere. I wanted to get into finance and German. And I heard of Hillsdale, I think in 1996, when I was in Washington, D.C., just traveling at an event and just socializing with people. And they talked about how great the school was. And so I did some more investigating and found that, hey, this is in Michigan. It's a couple hours away from where I grew up, near outside of Detroit, Michigan. And I thought this could be an opportunity. So I applied for the college in my final year of service in 1997.
So you grew up in Michigan, but you didn't hear about Hillsdale just down the road until you were in D.C.
Right.
Well, thank God for that, right?
Indeed, yes.
Was that part of your submarine talk? Because I'm actually intrigued about you serving on a submarine, because that's not something like anybody can just walk into the military and do. So tell me about the process of being able to be deployed on a submarine, because that is not an easy deployment.
So most people, when they join the military, they take the ASVAB. For people that want to be nuclear bound, they have to take this nuke test, and that's more mathematics, mechanics, engineering, testing. And so once you place into that, then you're sort of recruited into it, and and then you go through the whole pipeline of school. There is an attrition rate there because it's so accelerated. But I made it through and reported to my submarine when I reported was in dry dock. It takes about 3 years to replace a reactor. The government does that every 15, 18 years. And that's so that the reactor fuel, the uranium that through fission product decay, that's what powers the boat. Right. Well, once it went out to sea, then you qualify all these various stations where you work. The nuclear trained program has people who are mechanical operators, electronics technicians, and electrical operators primarily. And then a few people that are chemists are called engineering laboratory technicians. So as a mechanical operator enlisted and qualified, and then you're just working all the time out at sea when you're at sea. And they call them 18-hour days because you're 6 hours on, 12 off, and then start again 6 hours on, 12 off. But then you're up all the time for all sorts of drills like steam line rupture, or flooding, fire, or like a torpedo hitting or something like that, or dodging it.
So the psychological background you need to do that, though. I mean, obviously you have all that technical training, but to be able to be in basically a tin can with probably 30 or 40 of your closest friends for months at a time. Tell me about that mentally.
Yeah, and I think when you're young, you just kind of do things, and it's just...
It's like being in a fraternity, right?
You're right. So there were a fast attack submarine has an average maybe 110, 120 people. Officer to enlisted ratio is maybe 20% officer to 80% enlisted. So yeah, you qualify and need to know how everything works in the submarine. Then you specialize in your own areas, and so you'll go out to sea, and yes, you'll have these friends and that you make, and you just work through it together. Everybody's relying on everybody else.
So what would be an example of the type of training that would weed people out? You said there's attrition in that training program, which makes sense to me, but how does that work?
Earlier, we mentioned that there's an electronics or machinist mate or the electronics technician. So that's the A school. You're slotted into one of those three. So you have to get through these schools with passing grades. And then the next phase is power school, which everybody goes to. That's about 6.5 months. You're taking about maybe the equivalent of 3 semesters in the space of 6 months. So it's very compressed. You're very much married to what you're learning. Nuclear power, physics, math, mechanical engineering. So if people can't keep up with it, some will roll back and they'll try to start it again. But if you just can't keep up with it, you do a trit, and then maybe you go into a different rating in the military, but Navy, but not the nuclear field.
So there's a academic
there's a lot of
process.
academic attrition. And then after that, there's the prototype where it's hands-on. What they have is they have like the aft half of a submarine cut out. They have one engine room. An aircraft carrier has 8 engine rooms, 1 nuclear reactor in each. And so you get a hands-on experience in one of these engine rooms at a prototype somewhere for about 6 months, so that you learn how all these systems interact. And then you work on that.
What about the physical training? You're underwater for how long at a time? Just kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Right?
The physical training, to be in the Navy, you have to know how to swim, but you're not swimming on a submarine. You can be underwater for quite a long time, but the constraint is you just run out of food because there's only so much space to have food stored on a submarine. So, for example, fresh milk will be gone after about 10 days. Fruit, 14. They'll make their own bread in areas where they can make a little more noise. And the food is the constraint. So we'll get that flown in or sort of surface, pop up. So typically they'll go out for a few weeks. It all changes. You never know your schedule. That's all admirals that kind of control the schedules. If you're at the Atlantic coast or Pacific fleet, they all decide that. So you won't know your schedule much more than 2-3 weeks out, and that's subject to change at all times.
So you are stuck, and you don't even know when the end is coming.
That's right. So you just kind of know that I'm in this pipeline for this amount of time of my life, and that's what you're committed to.
So I would imagine when you enroll at Hillsdale College, the academic rigor obviously was significant, but you were already prepared mentally for some pretty rigorous training. So this probably was a good transition for you.
It was. I was interested in the liberal arts. So on a submarine, you don't have a lot of room, so you read books. And I was just interested in what it had to offer for all of the liberal arts. And I saw that it had all these great foreign exchange programs, and the size was just right. It was just 2 hours away from where my family lives. I have 4 siblings and parents. They're all well. So I just thought this would be a great place to have as a next chapter and phase of life, come what may.
So how was the transition from scheduled, regimented, sort of military life to Hillsdale to college, going to school with a bunch of younger people and a different phase of life? How did that go?
Yeah, I thought I'd fit in well, but I mean, there were some elements to it where I think I focused more on the academic classes, and I got involved in some things like honoraries. I enjoyed the choir, and I made some good friends. So there were some elements of it that it took a little bit of adjusting, but it was good.
And so finance and German. So I'm guessing there's a little bit of German heritage in your background?
Mom came from, my mom immigrated to the States from Germany shortly before the German economic miracle in 1961. And my dad's parents did after the First War, because there was a demand at that time in Michigan for a lot of engineers and automotive. So I do have the German heritage. And so I was fortunate to have German taught to me as a child, and I just wanted to continue it and get the formal education on that, the grammar, the composition, and the rest of the literature.
I would say you took advantage of Hillsdale's study abroad opportunities maybe more than anyone I've ever seen. You were over in Oxford and you did some studying in Germany. Talk about that experience and why you really jumped in feet first in those experiences.
Thanks so much. So I had a few good friends, and one asked me if in my second semester already, hey, there's an opening to go to Oxford, Center for Medieval and Renaissance Studies. Would you like to go? And I'm like, absolutely. So I signed up and tried to apply and explained why I was interested in that. And so the Center for Medieval and Renaissance Studies, that was a full semester abroad in England during what they call a Hilary term, which is our second semester. And that was great. Took Gothic art and architecture, studied under a Reformation thought scholar named Alistair McGrath, and my German tutorial professor, she helped write the Oxford Duden dictionary. So these were very serious scholars. Then we had another integrative class. So I enjoyed it because at the time I was just wanting to take all the possible liberal arts classes, and even though that it helped with the German for classes, but
and the difference that when you said tutorial, so these are one-on-ones, right? Which is a difference from school here. Talk about that a little bit.
Right. So that program, whatever you want to study, they find you a tutor, and then it's a dedicated tutor to that subject.
That's
so
awesome.
I studied medieval. There's something called Middle High German. So there's all these phases of language. You're familiar with like Old English, Middle English, and today's English. And so over time, language changes. And German has 5 phases known as Old High German, Middle High German, then Early New High German, and then today's German. And then you have dialects. And so the Middle High German would have been written during like the Ottonian times of 11 to 1300. So I learned a little bit of that, and it was just fascinating to me. And so the tutors are found for one particular subject. And there are other activities we could do while there, such as choir and participate in other such.
Oh, that's great. That's my one regret from college. I don't have much because it was a great experience at Hillsdale, but my one regret was not taking advantage of that. And I had a lot of scholarships, thankfully. I was very grateful for those from Hillsdale, but they didn't transfer internationally, so I couldn't fathom of paying for it. I just couldn't think of how to do it. Now I wish I'd just taken the loans out, and I don't recommend that for many things, but
You still can do that.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
They might be able to give you some.
Take a lot of PTO.
Yeah.
Anyway, it just seems like a wonderful experience.
Well, I think at this point we'll take a break and be right back with the White and Blue podcast.
It's no secret that Americans are more divided than ever. And it's not just over what policies will improve our great country. No, it's over whether America is great at all, whether America deserves our love. That's why Imprimis is so important. Imprimis looks at the issues of the day from a constitutional perspective, reminding citizens always of our great heritage of liberty. For more than 50 years, Imprimis has featured speeches from the smartest conservative thinkers and writers at Hillsdale events. These days, Hillsdale publishes people like Molly Hemingway, Andy Puzder, Harmeet Dillon, and Chris Rufo. Over 6.4 million American households and businesses receive Imprimis absolutely free. And I urge you to sign up for it today at no charge. To get your free lifetime subscription, go to hillsdale.edu/lifetime right now.
Now it's time for the Hillsdale History Minute, where we bring a slice of Hillsdale College history to the White and Blue podcast. Did you ever hear about the Great Rebellion of 1866? In 1866, the administration of Hillsdale College ordered that all outsiders attending literary society meetings must be on a list approved by the president. Almost half the students were expelled before the protests ended. Two of those students were very prominent, including Congressional Medal of Honor recipient Moses Luce and famous poet Will Carleton. Welcome back to the White and Blue podcast, where we have 2002 graduate Wolfgang Krenzer as today's guest. Wolfgang, again, thanks for being with us today. We talked about your Navy history or your Navy experience. After you graduated from Hillsdale, you settled into your professional career, and then you jumped back into the service, this time in another branch. So talk about that path.
Sure thing. So after I got settled into a job, I started at Speedway after working through a few other companies, and now married. I was living in the Dayton, Ohio region, Beaver Creek, Ohio, and that's right near Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and thought it might be neat to get back into the service. It had been a 10-year hiatus since active duty, and thought that this could be good. So I was recruited into the medical material logistics field, which was maybe my fourth choice, but that's where the need was. And then I became an Air Force reservist, enlisted, reporting to the 445th Aeromedical Evacuation Squadron. And then I would do that for the next 14 years.
So how did that work? You've done a lot of work, and we'll talk a bit more about that, but in logistics, analytics, marketing, finance, how did all of that work? And then your duties with the military, did they overlap? How do they all connect? It seems like a lot of similar skills in your skill set that kind of could be applied to all of those things, and tell me how that all connected together for you.
Sure. Well, at first, when training for the Air Force, it was very different from what I was doing at Speedway. I was working in various marketing and analytical roles to look at numbers, your sales margin units. And in the military, now Air Force, I was assigned logistics. Now, one thing that was great was the analytical. And at the same time, I was working on my supply chain management degree, a master's degree in logistics and supply chain management from Wright State University. And it was interesting. Logisticians are trained to look at everything in units, numbers, national stock numbers. So you can know nothing, for instance, about pharma, medical, even what a lot of these things do. It's a very small career field. So 80% of the people that are in aeromedical, they're doctors, nurses, technicians that actually work to save lives. But to do that well, they need logistics to see that all their equipment is in calibration and all their what are called in-flight kits are perfectly supplied. And for anything that has expiration dates, that they're in date. So our job as logisticians is to keep those all intact, the inventory perfect. So did that weekends unless called for exercises or later deployments.
So it seems like what I was saying earlier, your different roles that you've had all seem to have numbers, figures, analytics in common, and yet you love to study, to read, to, travel abroad. So you're kind of like a true Renaissance man, Wolfgang, I would say. Mm-hmm. But what would you say is the greatest skill set that you had that you've been able to apply to all those areas?
I think integratively, one example might be when deployed in Germany, you're managing a big warehouse now. You've got all sorts of aircraft coming in and out for these medical missions. So Ramstein Air Base, Germany, for that mission is designed such that it's basically a hub. And then the logistician has this warehouse. I think here's an example where you find a way to manage the inventory well, and then you sort everything out perfectly on the shelves so that when people need something, they are able to find it right away and then get on with things. So that's an example of applying numbers, supply chain, collaborating with Germans. And
right. So is that kind of what you
satisfying.
Envisioned doing when you studied finance and German at Hillsdale?
I think when I wanted to go international business, but double majoring in finance and German had the benefit of more German classes. Mm-hmm. So I did that. And I thought it would just get into a business, in the big business world, and use both for business planning or analytics, reporting.
One thing that I saw on your resume that I thought was really interesting, because I'd never heard of this before. I mean, I've heard of it. I've heard of the industry, but I didn't know of the word planogram, like a planogram specialist.
Yeah.
So designing the layouts of stores to maximize selling. And were you involved directly in the planning or more of the analytics behind the scenes to improve those? Or
yeah, that was my first office job with Speedway. Started as a district manager trainee for a year and ran a store, had like 26 employees. And so planogram, there's two things. When you run a retail store, you have both the floor plan, which is how all the shelves are arranged, but then the planogram is how each individual item is displayed on a shelf. And it gets into facings. You can have multiple facings of the same item or fewer, depending on what sells the most. So your most popular drink is Mountain Dew, so you'll have tons of those facings, or Reese's Peanut Butter Cup is your most popular candy, so you'll have several in the United States, so you'll have several facings of those. So it's actually using software to look at all these analytics by item, and then making recommendations to what are called associate category managers who work with all these vendors who want to bring in all their product, because you just have limited space in a store. A convenience store, they're very big on this, and then grocery stores do the same thing. Everyone's fighting for space. So when you go to a grocery store, there's a lot of thought that goes into what's there and who gets to have that space.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Mm-hmm. It's also fascinating that I'm sure they use psychology and that kind of thing to manipulate people.
And end caps, for instance, have a 15% higher sale than something that's what's called inline. So walking down the aisles is called inline, whereas when you walk right in and see something on an end cap, something that's more impulse, there's a lot of...
So do stores decide based on sales to maximize their selling, or do the suppliers pay more to be on an end cap? Or...
The suppliers will be asked to give greater rebates or incentives. Okay. And individual stores, if you're part of a chain, then it'll be the managers of all of these stores that decide what goes where and how many.
It's really cool.
You had experience in the Navy, you're experienced in the Air Force. How do you compare the two, and which one did you like better?
Uh-oh.
We'll get you in trouble here.
Yeah. The Navy, I like the uniforms better.
Oh.
And the Air Force, I liked that I was above ground better, and it's more conducive to family life. And the Air Force was part-time. So I knew in the Navy that I wouldn't do much more than 6 or 8 years active, because you're truly working 100 hours a week. You're just totally, that is your life. I didn't think that that'd be a long-term solution for life. And I didn't think I'd ever get back in the military after the 6-8 years. I thought that would just be the adventure and then move on. But then I thought it'd be interesting to have a parallel life, both part-time service in the Air Force Reserves and this other work I do in the business world.
So is that what compelled you to re-enlist in a different branch, or did you miss service? Was it patriotism?
I've got to tell you all the above, because
Okay.
I thought my dad did 4 years active, 29 years reserve, all in the Navy. He was on submarines. He was on a diesel sub during the Korean War. And so there was a little bit of that. There was the proximity, the convenience. We lived close to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And then after a while, I got really good at the job, really efficient. You sort of promote, move up in rank as you do great work.
Mm-hmm.
And then you sort of feel like you're doing something for the good. And then I was a little unconventional because I was trying to find ways to save money for the government by being efficient and training on inventory management rather than just be trigger happy and buy things for the sake of buying things and have surplus stock that then goes to waste.
Full disclosure, we first met you because you signed up to help us with our alumni phone-a-thon last summer and had some interesting conversations during the time you were here on campus. But I noticed, you're kind of what we hope for in the alumni relations business, an engaged alumni who comes back for like CCA, which is why we're speaking to you here today. You're doing a CCA on campus. And also I know you've absorbed and taken a few of our online courses. So why have you been so engaged with the college? What are the things that keep bringing you back?
Yes, so I like the CCA for the subject matter. There's a lot of subjects that still interest me. I do like to read, but for a lot of work I do, which is numbers driven, I'm able to listen to podcasts simultaneously. And I really like the Hillsdale Online Learning. I think there's 45 courses now, maybe more, and I've only finished 8. I try to set these targets every year because you can do things around the house, like say you have a painting project, or a lot of it, if I'm working on something, I like to simultaneously learn something else, something new. And so that's what's very attractive to me. And the way I think of Hillsdale is, what if Hillsdale didn't exist? And when we think of some of the things that we've gone through over the last few years, colleges that are no longer distinctive, then you just think this has been a very rich and rewarding opportunity to be a part of Hillsdale's story and mission.
Yeah. It sounded just a minute ago, you said you had an annual goal or a goal for lifelong learning for your personal learning, so tell me about that.
Yeah, some people set reading goals, and so I'll read a few books a year, and then I read a lot of current events. But then for the Hillsdale, because I think they do such a nice job with those online learnings, I do have a goal of about 4 more a year.
Okay. So you make a goal of taking 4 online courses a year, which is awesome. I've taken 1 and I didn't finish it. So I'm not the poster child of the online course student, but I'll get there. But one exciting thing for me is that they're slowly putting them all on podcast form. So just for the listener out there to be aware of that. It's hard for me to sit and watch something, but do you listen to them via podcast or do you watch the videos?
I try to watch the videos because it's so nicely done.
Mm-hmm.
It's so nicely done. So I feel like if I'm working on a painting project, and I try to, especially like things, history, like the Roman, they do such a nice job with the visual, with the visuals. And
that was one of Dr. Arndt's big, I think, missions when he came, is the Articles of Association of the college talk about our mission to educate all who wish to learn. And obviously with only 1,600 students, we can't do that. We can't educate all who wish to learn, at least on campus. So the online courses, the K-12 outreach, all of these programs we do on campus and across the country are all, part of our mission to radiate what Hillsdale does across the country, and hopefully impact, people that wouldn't have the opportunity to have a 4-year undergraduate program here. So they're very exciting. Now, you also serve and give back, and tell us why you do that.
There's a few things I do locally now, especially since I retired. I do Adopt a Highway for Marathon. I've arranged their tennis team for 5 years. I am part of the International Association for Financial Crimes Investigators. That was a carryover from what I did, the work I did as a fraud analyst in the Credit Card Center for Marathon. This as a treasurer there. These are people that have, it's an association with 7,000 people, and we volunteer to connect law enforcement with business, Secret Service, so that when there's fraud, you're able to find somebody quickly and then go after it rather than go blind looking for help to get through investigations.
Wow.
So this is all volunteer work, and that I do a little bit of stuff locally that I enjoy. So it's...
You don't do a lot of sitting around.
No. I like to move around all the time, and if I'm not working in the house on numbers, then I like to go outside and garden or landscape, or I've even taken part-time work for fun, which is lawn irrigation, because actually while I was at Hillsdale, I did lawn and landscaping and sprinkler work in the summer so that I could graduate from Hillsdale almost debt-free, because I had saved a lot of money from the Navy because I didn't have a car for those 6 years. You don't need a car if you're going to be on a submarine. Nope. And then I tacked on to that all this extra summer work, and so it was fun. Mm. It's a nice way to get your vitamin D to work outside when you can. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I think the whole Renaissance man, the more we hear from you, the more that rings true for me anyway, because it seems like you're in a lot of different areas and an expert in at least, a dozen fields, investigate. You could be a private eye, I guess, based on, the way you approach things and your analytical mind.
Thanks. I like working in supportive roles where I can help bring things together.
And you have a family of 3 daughters?
3 daughters, one of whom is... So I have a daughter who is 17 and 2 others that are twins. They're 13 each, and one of the daughters...
Double whammy.
They're so great. They're all different personalities, but they all get along. One of them is interested in Hillsdale because she's interested in German and volleyball.
Oh.
So, and by the way, there aren't a lot of colleges that offer all these great language programs as Hillsdale does. So for those listeners that are looking at colleges and like languages, this is one of the finest.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we appreciate your willingness to come back and to serve and be involved with Hillsdale as much as you have. It brings me a lot of joy as the alumni director here. So thank you.
Yeah. I appreciate everything that the alumni team is doing to try to reach out and get more of us engaged.
It's a labor of love.
It is. I'd love it if the percentages went up for a class.
Me too, Wolfgang. What would be your pitch for someone to give?
I have to think about how to word it. It's this idea of, what if Hillsdale didn't exist?
Right.
Because if let's say there's only 10, 15% of us who give, and it's more to just show our affinity for the college, regardless the amount. Why do we choose to go to college? And you think especially today, when I went, the standards were so much more attainable. I mean, maybe it was like a 30 or 40% acceptance rate.
It was much higher than that.
Even higher. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So obviously I wasn't that special again.
Yeah, me neither.
Right. So no, I mean, what is it now? 17 to 20% who applied. And then what's sad is you think about, okay, these 83% that didn't get accepted, where to next? Is there another distinctive school that's at least similar, that's their second choice? And with what we've seen lately, that there aren't a lot of great options. So it's hard. So for those of us that have been blessed and fortunate enough to go, why not help it grow further by maybe having some affinity and maybe through a small gift?
Expressing it that way, yep.
Yeah, one of our alumni board members, I think, summed it up perfectly recently. He came up with this phrase, "Don't be a bum."
Yeah.
So I don't know if we'll adopt that. Maybe that's an unofficial
why'd you fly off the face of the planet? I mean, so we miss you. We want to help drive the mission forward.
Yeah. So very good. Thanks for not being a bum.
All right. Appreciate
Wolfgang,
it.
thank you so much for joining us. And for Colleen McGinnis, this is Doug Goodnow thanking you for joining us on the White and Blue podcast, and may that spirit long remain.